Hello, everyone. My name is LaVonn Schlegel, and I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for International Business here at the IU Kelley School of Business. It's my honor to host today's edition of our ongoing cyber-focused interviews where we explore topics impacting businesses around the world. Today, I would like to welcome to the table Dr. Brad Wheeler. Brad is a professor in the IU Kelley School of Business Operations and Decision Technologies Department, and for the last 19 years has served in senior IT and marketing roles here at the university. Brad, thanks for taking some time to talk with me today. I look forward to having a really good conversation.
It's good to be with you.
Yeah, I want to jump in. You and I have known each other for a while, and what I've always kind of considered you as a Renaissance man in higher education, right? You've been in all of the roles that one can serve in the education institution. You've been an educator, so you've been a user of all of the services and the needs for higher education. You've been a IT person, so where you focused on just the IT piece of it. And then you've also been in higher level management where you've had to kind of step outside of the discipline focus and into the more strategic focus of the business. A really unique, I think, set of experiences. So what I'm really curious about is wearing all three of those hats. What is your definition of cybersecurity?
Well, cybersecurity has sure evolved. I think a lot of times we began with kind of a medieval view of it. We're going to build a big wall around our city to protect us from the raiding hordes that are out there who want to do bad things. And, some decade or more ago, I guess 15 years ago, kind of that walled city approach gave way to realizing with so many personal devices that the networks had to be a lot more open. I remember going out to Silicon Valley around 2006. We were talking to VC firms out there and saying, yeah, this bring your own device to work thing that y'all are all thinking is a new thing. Like, we've been living this for 20 years at universities already. So how do you keep a network secure when it has to be somewhat porous? So we've learned a lot about that. But if you say, what's my definition of cybersecurity today? I would say it's the wrong word. The word today is cyber resilience. How do you build an organization that is resilient when bad things happen? Because if someone really turns their nefarious efforts at you, whether you're a small business, a library, a large university, a big corporation, it's going to be really, really hard to keep the worst of the bad guys out. So how do you ensure that you are resilient if something goes wrong?
I really like two things that you said in there. I really like the walled city metaphor versus the more open and porous approach to this. And I like the idea of cyber resiliency. Does cyber resiliency mean something different for higher education than it might mean for business corporations in general?
I don't believe it does. I think some of our challenges are different. You eloquently introduced me as vice president for IT, where your line authority decrees run into the first faculty member who has a different view on how the world should work. So you learn to navigate that and the complexities of a large multi-campus university, whereas a corporation sometimes do have a bit more of a line authority that they can say no device of X or Y here, or we're kicking everyone off the network, or you must use this onerous thing. We certainly have to do some of that at IU. But the point I would make, whether it was the massive and targeted breach of the Australian National University that has been well documented how that happened, or Equifax, or all the things that you see going on around there, we're all facing the same challenges out there for which the same remedies largely apply of vigilance, preparation, enough staff, enough budget, and just keeping on top of it as it changes every day.
Yeah. And, I think that as a faculty person and as a staff person at the university, I have been caught in the tests that you all put out of am I going to push the button or not? Is it a phishing exercise or not? And it's a real challenge for those of us who don't live that every day to think about it.
Well, and I have to say, if I jump in on that,
please.
Phishing and email remains the most prominent vector for some bad thing getting into an organization. And the phishing exercises can create fatigue where people stop really paying attention to them and all. And as you've likely experienced, where you really learn whether phishing is, people are skilling up for understanding and detecting phishing is when you very personalize the phishing messages. After 2 years with our large IT staff across the whole university, over 1,000 people, of phishing exercises, we had driven our numbers down. We were happy about that. And we really upped our game a few years ago where the fish you got appeared to come from your direct supervisor for everyone. It had been personalized and it had a reference to a common technology that we use at the university that people use every day. And our error and open rate went up to like 38% on that. And I'm just like, you know, what do you do? But you just keep educating, vigilance on the technical side.
Yeah, I do appreciate how difficult it must be today. And as I was preparing for this interview, I got to thinking about the past 20 years, right? So essentially you've been in that IT role for the university for 20 years and how fast things change and what the amazing learning curve for keeping up with innovation has to be. You know, how do you approach that from a management question? How do you not only keep the university safe, but keep your staff not just trained and resourced, but not exhausted and just ready to throw in the towel?
Yeah, I appreciate you referring to the staff or referencing the staff and not exhausted, because the teams can become extremely exhausted. Really great cybersecurity talent is very hard to hire and retain. You invest in skilling them up. And when you skill them up, they have more career opportunities out there everywhere. So this is really a big challenge. I said about 3 years ago that I had spent more time on cybersecurity for the university in the last 12 months than I had previously in the prior decade of time on it, because the stakes had just escalated that much. So what do? I think one thing is you better keep some bench strength in your cybersecurity operation. If you're a smaller organization and you've got, you know, a technical person and she or he is running around doing a lot of things and they're also doing cybersecurity, you know, you lose that person, you are seriously, possibly in a world of hurt very quickly. If you're a mid-sized bank, a regional bank, or if you're a large, even multinational, I would look very carefully at your bench strength in cybersecurity talent. Are you bringing people through a skills pipeline? Are you even rotating some people out? Someone may be coming out of internal audit and they could come over and work in the cybersecurity organization. But if you're trying to run cybersecurity lean and mean is really gambling.
Yeah, I just think it would be absolutely daunting from a management point of view. And then on top of that, you also, as the head of IT and then into the management of the corporation, you have to figure out how do you manage all of the pieces in IT, because cybersecurity isn't the only thing that you have to manage in order to keep your business in that position of competitive advantage. How do you manage that?
Well, for a lot of things that are happening, we tend to think in terms of small bets and big bets. So small bets, you can start pilots and try things along the way, whether it's cybersecurity tools or it's something that goes all the way that affects your core business. You know, for us, that's education and research. And we made some early bets about textbooks going digital. And there was all sorts of belief, nobody wants to read digital books, they're terrible, or yeah, this is the future and it's the way. But everybody was screaming about the high price of textbooks. And so let's make some small bets and see if we can figure out what to do along the way. And, you know, that turned into a really good thing for IU, saving students at least $6 million a year here. But small bets, and we scaled that one up. Sometimes you make big bets. Having a better relationship with your customer involves CRM, customer relationship management systems. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but we ended up making a very big and expensive bet on Salesforce. and then really just drove the crap out of the implementation of that. So small bets and big bets, but in every case, those systems need to touch data that may be federally protected, like educational records. You have privacy policies that you've got to maintain. So innovating and staying secure in that period of change is a lot of work, and particularly for large complex organizations like IU.
Yeah, and then you throw into that geographic differences and constituency opinions, and I imagine that most days you feel like you're being pulled in 87 different directions.
Well, even something simple that I say simple, when we moved to two-factor authentication some years ago, using your phone or another key as a two-factor device, I mean, there were immediate challenges in how that would work with our distance education, online learning students who are working in China or in other countries where internet regulations there made that a very difficult thing to do, or faculty who were traveling abroad and we had to provide an alternate means because we couldn't have an implementation of a cybersecurity policy immediately debilitate part of the mission and work of the university.
Right. Right. As someone who spends a lot of time in international settings, it was very difficult to navigate. But I have to give your group credit because I never felt like I was at it alone. Right. There may have been issues, but I always felt like somebody else had my back. And I think in a corporation, that's just really critical, is that the only way to keep me from giving up is to not make me feel like it's all on my shoulders. So, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? 10 months in, whatever that number is, 12 months in now, I guess. And all of us are trying to figure out still how we navigate this. How do you prepare an organization to respond to this kind of inflection point? Nobody planned for it. Nobody expected it. It wasn't even really a serious prediction that we were looking for.
Yeah, when some of the really bad cybersecurity waves went around, that knocked the National Health Service of the UK offline, and we started preparing. I mean, we've had disaster recovery plans and exercise them, and of a fairly serious nature. We even had one discussion of what would we do if we had to completely disconnect Indiana University in its entirety from the public internet, because all things public internet are infected in some way. And you just had to completely disconnect, and how could you run core systems? And that's a daunting exercise to even consider. But going into this pandemic, as March, a year ago, it became clear this was different. And then we accelerated into March and April. The thing that I think helped the most for the IT side to get through that and enable support to the faculty and the student side was 20 years of continuous culture in our IT organization. We are somewhat unique. For when I just stepped down this past summer, for 23 years, we had only had 2 CIOs. And both CIOs were full professors in the university. And so we had a lot of continuity of culture in the IT ranks. We were able to hire from within, promote from within, and everyone just has what is needed. How do we solve this problem? I mean, it really was a culture of heroic effort, of technology enablement, and extraordinary support and boot camps and training for faculty who were being pushed to teach online all of a sudden. And how do we manage security in these matters? And LaVonn, the one thing I would say that really enabled that to come through as strongly as it did was the culture of the organization that had been built over 20 years.
Yeah, it has been an interesting ride for coming from a corporate background and then entering education. I've always been struck by the individuality that underpins higher education, right? In a corporate world, there's a lot more power of the directive. In higher education, that power of directive is not as clear and it's not as embraced. And I think that posed just a whole set of problems that I've been fascinated watching.
One of our now deceased but beloved professors who served in administration some decades ago, and he looked at me stoically one day, coming out of the business school, trying to bring greater degrees of management prowess to how we do things around here. And he looked at me stoically one day and said, "Brad, you don't seem to understand. The university is purposefully organized to ensure no one is in charge." And that's certainly not completely accurate, but it does give a window into a contrast with the corporate environment.
I think it certainly feels that way. And I imagine there's a lot of smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, that now that they are out, everybody's at home, they don't have any central location, management's not spending time together, communications changed. How does the idea of IT come into play to help them find that line of, not necessarily directive management style, but ensure that everybody is on the same page while still being safe with the business systems?
Well, one of the things that, if I expand on the direction of your question just a little bit more, that I think is going to be a very positive bounce coming out of COVID for corporations and certainly for us at IU, is a growing sophistication in how we measure outcomes rather than measure inputs. I needed to see LaVonn at the office from 8 to 5, or she's noting that she's out from 2 to 4 p.m. or something. And increasingly, you're just seeing firms. Salesforce made a big announcement a couple of days ago that they're really going to stop focusing on this traditional industrial age approach to work, and not only putting into the lens of, well, you work from home, but here are all the same expectations. Really a shift of organizational culture within IT, and certainly within and across the institutions, of how do we get more done, and quite frankly, enable a better family life, a better home life for people in different chapters of their life with kids or various other elder care challenges at home. So I think that is really one of the most exciting frontiers coming out of COVID. We've learned we can keep it rolling from home. We've also learned there's isolation and loneliness from some people. We know some people love remote work, some people hate it. Are we going to need as many office chairs as we had before? Maybe you're going to go in for 2 days. I'm going to go in the other 2 days, but we're both working full time. So the practice of work is going to evolve, which will mean the practice of securing work from home offices and heaven knows what you and your teenagers have installed at home. We again, through cyber resiliency, that doesn't become a problem for the organization.
Yeah, I think it is a very exciting time to see the type of changes that will happen in the next decade. I want to shift a little bit as we're talking about changes for the next decade and talk about, from an educator point of view, workforce development. As I talk to corporations and managers and CEOs all over the world, what I hear is we need to make sure that our college students are graduating with the right skill set for the next decade. Now, when I ask them that question of, well, what are those skill sets and what do you think they're missing now? It becomes a very ambiguous conversation. Everybody seems to feel like there needs to be a change, but they don't know what it is. How do we do that? How do we make sure that our workforce is technologically savvy when they're English majors or when they're dance majors? How do we manage that?
It's one of the things the university particularly can do well. If we set our heart to doing it. So, on the Bloomington campus, you have the +1 degrees. Go get a liberal arts degree, a fine liberal arts degree from our College of Arts and Sciences, and add 1 year of a Kelley master's on top of it. You've got those great critical thinking skills. You've got all that you may learn in an arts and sciences degree, and then you come in and add, maybe a master's in information systems or, a master's in supply chain to give you that out of the gate skill for that first job. But the real arc of it is, university, there's always the debate between skills and education. So someone graduating and having certain skills just in working with cloud-based applications or using Excel particularly well, or artful use of PowerPoint. Those are good skills, but the education is to learn how to learn and to keep an individual self-motivated in learning how to learn and advancing along the way. Because we are long beyond the era where you can get the skill set to be job class X, third category, and that's going to give you a run in life. That's not at all. That's what the business leaders are telling you. I do believe the crossovers at institutions that go always, so the Kelley majors, the School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering, the Luddy School majors, taking a comparative literature class, taking music. We have some of the largest growth of electives consumed, undergraduate electives consumed in the IU Jacobs School of Music are the business students. And so I think that is an area where universities can be particularly helpful, because we've got the catalog and the capabilities for these kinds of cross education. And if I could put in one more plug on workforce development, I say this everywhere I go. If you're looking for your next career path and you have some aptitude towards it, consider adding cybersecurity skills. That may be from a law and policy perspective. It may be from a technical perspective, something that might be more of a computer science angle, or it may just be from a management and risk perspective of how much risk does an organization want to take. The Kelley School has online masters in cybersecurity, which is a blend of law, technology, and business and strategy policy. If it's not from us, there are many, many great cybersecurity programs out there. But I think it is fair to say, from all foreseeable labor trends, we're probably going to need fewer accountants in the future than we did in the past. Automation is taking care of a lot of those things, and that can be seen in lots of career fields. We're going to need a lot of people who want to cross over from that first degree they had to maybe into a master's or a certificate in a growth area. And we need everybody we can get to consider that coming over to the cybersecurity field.
I think that's a really, really interesting point. How do we take that message into the community colleges and into the high schools?
Boy, I think we take it everywhere. I take it to every business that I talk to. I do believe there are many, many certificates and skill programs for students with 1 or 2 years of college is enough to do very well in this field. Getting high school students interested in technology early and the artful use of it and securing it. Those are things we can do in some labs and workshops. We do some of those summer camps here at IU. But I really think if we're going to deal with our labor shortage, our skills shortage in this area, the richest pipeline of that talent right now would be career switchers. Someone who's been a marketing analyst for a firm for a while, or they've been doing financial reporting or whatever, and they're a few years out of school, and then maybe 20 years out of school or 2, but they're just ready for that next challenge in life. And these skills can be gained online in part-time programs that don't call for large life adjustments.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on, and I think that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the idea of somebody like me, English major with an MBA, to look at security, cybersecurity would have been a really difficult thing. But now the pathway is a lot clearer, and I think a lot more accessible than it was then.
I think we could get you in that Kelley certificate program.
I think I'm past that, but thank you very much. So the last, I kind of want to wrap up the conversation going back to our IIB's constituency, which is small and medium-sized businesses. We work with corporations too, but we tend to focus in that middle round, looking to expand their businesses internationally, looking to become more borderless, if you will. What advice do you have for them as they wrestle with this idea of limited labor market, but huge cybersecurity or cyber resiliency challenges? How do they think about their resources? How do they think about managing the decisions that they make? What advice would you give them?
I think one of the key things is creative capitalism, creative destruction in capitalism. really calls for firms to renew themselves in their products and service offerings over time. And I think that is an endless journey for smaller, mid-sized firms. I think they do have to learn how to hire outside of their market and supervise people remotely that they may have very limited, if ever, face-to-face contact with. I think there's a question of how often you can do that successfully just via contracting, or when you need to cultivate some of those skills inside your organization. And if you're trying to cultivate them from some remote hire, I've seen that go well, and I've seen that go very poorly. On the go-to-market side with their business partnerships and sales, I think the decade looks to be very necessarily turbulent for policy and privacy, particularly privacy law and regulation. If you've not seen Shoshana Zuboff's book, Surveillance Capitalism, it's quite the tome to read. She just had a piece in the New York Times in mid-January about this, and she's really been on this point about when will the society kind of bite back on our privacy rights and how much we give up. And right now it's a regulatory patchwork. It's very difficult for firms who are wanting to operate in multiple jurisdictions, or increasingly even in multiple states in the United States, to ensure that they are complying with privacy law and evolving expectations. So those are just a few quick ones that I list as challenges more than solutions.
You know, I think that that's a great place for us to wrap up in that. I think that what I've learned today is that it's a huge topic. We'll never be able to cover all of the questions in a short interview, but there's hope. There's hope for small businesses. There's hope for education. There's hope all the way around as we start to kind of re-navigate where we are and the way we look at things, the way we define our own needs and wants. Because, you know, I look at the Facebook versus Apple fight that's going on right now from a privacy and a security point of view. And people who want the access through Facebook have a very different perspective on those who want the privacy and the protection from an Apple. So those discussions impact businesses every day, and it doesn't make your job any easier.
People sometimes say, I couldn't find you on Facebook, and I say, thank you. I went into Facebook in 2006 before it became publicly available beyond universities, and I exited in 2006, seeing where this was likely to go in terms of privacy and knowing or lack thereof. I think we'll come of age as society in this decade.
Yeah, and I think that that is the topic for our next conversation that you and I'll have maybe in about 18 months. All right. Okay, thank you, Brad. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective with us today.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.